Welcome to the Balanced Hormones Empowered Women podcast. I'm your host, Abby Vallejo. I am a registered dietitian, certified personal trainer, and health coach. And what I do is I teach women of all ages how to align their diet, their lifestyle, and their exercise with their hormones in order to unlock their most vibrant health. And this is a feminine based approach of working smarter and not harder. So today, my topic is going to be appetite and how hungry should you be? And this is a question that I feel like I get asked a lot, and women are, wondering a lot. Should I have an appetite? How much of an appetite should I have? Is it normal to be this hungry? Or vice versa, a lot of people that come to me because they don't have an appetite anymore. So let's talk about that. Too much of an appetite, too little of an appetite, what is the sweet spot? And then what are some ways that appetite can naturally fluctuate, and how do you roll with those changes? Let's dive right in. So, first of all, I want to say feeling hungry is good. Now, I know we live in a society where we're so often focused on weight loss and control. And, I know for most of us as women, we maybe grew up watching our mothers or the women around us being on diets and, kind of just hearing these generalized things in societies. Don't eat too much, you might get fat. There's always kind of that fear-based programming that's out there for us as women. So I think most of us tend to have this, kind of this fear of, well, too much of an appetite is a bad thing. I wouldn't want to be too hungry because I might get too big, if I eat too much kind of thing. So I do feel like that is the most common thing that I hear. But I want to say, it is natural and normal to feel hungry. You are supposed to have an appetite, right? A good, healthy appetite is normal. We want to have an appetite for food and we want to have an appetite for life. We will talk more about that. First, I want to touch on, because I see this a lot as a dietitian in my practice, if you don't have an appetite. Now, this tends to happen as we age. Obviously, we get less of an appetite, but so often I'm talking to people of all ages and they're telling me, well, I really don't get that hungry. Or I eat a little bit and then I'm full. Or I can't eat until I'm very full, so I have to eat like small meals throughout the day. And isn't that the right thing? We were always told, small frequent meals throughout the day is the gold standard. I'm really here to bust that myth, by the way, because you want to the ideal is that you're eating more at meal times, good, nourishing, healthy foods that actually give your body the energy and the nutrients that it needs, like proteins, healthy fats, nutrient dense food at your meals. You're having a good solid meal, you're able to digest it properly, and then you're not snacking between meals, right? So, and that way you don't wear out your digestion by eating constantly throughout the day. And this is a problem that I've definitely touched on before. But having a good appetite, feeling hungry, and then going and eating a good size, nutrient dense meal. This is basically how we're set up for success, right? So if you don't feel hungry very often, or you're one of those people that you eat a little bit and you feel full, why does this happen? Well, most often this has to do with your digestive capacity, and that relates to stomach acid. So basically, the process that the food goes through, we put food in our mouth, we chew it, we swallow it. When it goes to our stomach, the very first thing our stomach does is secretes stomach acid, right? So the stomach, when it has food present, will become very acidic, and it's supposed to, becomes like a pH of 1 or 2. This is a good thing. Your stomach is set up to handle this, because what it does is starts breaking down that food into smaller pieces so that it can actually be digested and absorbed appropriately. The acid is also important because it activates your digestive enzymes. So if you don't have enough stomach acid, not only will it not break down food into small pieces to be properly absorbed, it won't activate your digestive enzymes, which you need to make the most of actually absorbing the nutrients from your food. Also, we need good levels of stomach acid because your stomach has to get acidic enough to signify to that sphincter, that doorway, that portal basically between your esophagus and your stomach, it needs to close so you don't get an acid reflux going back up your esophagus. And you actually need your stomach to be acidic enough to reach the point where it signals to that sphincter, okay, time to close. So you need acid for that too. And then to kill off microbes, because things that we swallow coming in on our food, there's microbes, there's pathogens, things like that we're naturally exposed to in what we drink and what we eat. And our body, that's one of our first lines of defense is our stomach acid, which will kill off microbes, parasites, things coming in. So we need good, healthy, strong levels of stomach acid when we eat to protect us from that. So that said, people who have low stomach acid, and this is becoming more and more common, especially in a world where, if people have digestive upsets, they go to the doctor, not to rip on doctors, but usually, and I've seen this again and again, the first thing they prescribe, let's get you an acid blocker. So sometimes it's extreme, it's like omeprazole, and occasionally that is warranted. Say someone has an active ulcer, right? Of course, we're going to want to heal that, be on that short term. You should never be on an acid blocker long term because something like omeprazole, it's going to block 50% of your nutrient absorption. I've seen so many people come in after being on that for years and they are riddled with digestive deficiencies because no one told them to stop taking it after a few months, and they have not literally been able to absorb the nutrients from their food that they've been eating all these years. So something to keep in mind. So omeprazole is one of the strongest ones. There's other acid blockers out there. You could argue there's a place for them, like I said, if someone's having an ulcer or if they're having just lots of gastric inflammation, but these are temporary things that should not be taken long term because, yes, they can absolutely give you nutrient and mineral deficiencies in the future if taken long term. So, oftentimes when someone comes in and they're having heartburn or they're having reflux, it's actually the opposite. They actually don't have enough stomach acid to properly break down their food and to tell that sphincter, hey, it's time to close off so we don't get that reflux. So even though it may seem counterintuitive, heartburn, reflux is usually too little acid at an improper time. So what we do there is we like to supplement with stomach acid, as long as there's not an active ulcer, we supplement with stomach acid to retrain the body, and you can retrain it, to secrete the proper healthy amount of acid at the proper time, break down the food, and close off that sphincter so you don't get that reflux. It can make a world of difference. Also, people with poor stomach acid, they're going to have digestive issues, right? Because it's not properly breaking down their food. It's like that first domino in a whole chain, right? If that first domino isn't falling properly, the lower end of the chain is going to suffer, right? It's not going to fall in line accordingly. So these people with low stomach acid, they also usually have other GI problems further down the chain, not just digestion, but also bloating. They come in with gut issues, microbial imbalances, overgrowth, yeast overgrowth, things like that. Because again, going back to the stomach acid, you need stomach acid to protect you from those microbes and those pathogens. And if you don't have good levels of it, they can come in, they can get through, and they can set up shop in your gut and kind of wreak havoc there and just thrive because you didn't have a way to kill them off appropriately. Another thing I see a lot, which I alluded to, is malabsorption or nutrient deficiencies. Because of course, it's not just what you eat, it's what you absorb. And you need good levels of stomach acid to break down the food and, like I said, activate the enzymes and stimulate this whole process in order to make good use of your food. And tying into this, low bile is another thing that I see. So what is bile? Bile is one of those things that we probably all heard about, but what does it do, right? Bile is made in your liver, stored in your gallbladder. So if you don't have a gallbladder, I'm gonna mention something really important for you in just a minute. Made in your liver, stored in a gallbladder. It's how we metabolize fat appropriately. It's released in appropriate amounts every time we eat anything that has fat in it. So if you don't have good bile flow, you're gonna have impaired fat metabolism. We also need good levels of stomach acid to have good levels of bile. They go hand in hand. The body will always balance. If you have low bile, you're going to have low stomach acid. If you have good bile, you're going to have good stomach acid, and vice versa. The problem is if you don't have enough stomach acid, your body will automatically dial down on its bile production just because these two are always going together. And so if you don't have good bile, your body is automatically going to turn off that stomach acid production because so when we have food, and let me break this down here. When you have food in the stomach, it's nice and acidic, right? The stomach is built to handle that. However, when it moves on to the small intestine where everything gets absorbed, it needs to get neutralized because your small intestine is not capable of handling such an acidic environment. So it has to get neutralized from this acid to a more basic. Bile is one of the things that helps do that. So bile is secreted to help absorb the fats and digest properly, but also to neutralize this very acidic food content that's coming from the stomach into the small intestine. So if you don't have enough bile, the body is automatically going to turn down the stomach acid because it just knows I don't have enough bile to handle this acidic environment. So that's why they always go hand in hand. If you have low bile, you have low stomach acid, and vice versa. What does that mean? Well, if you, like I said, if you don't have good levels of bile, you have impaired fat metabolism. You're also going to have poor digestion. So especially, and I especially see this, I mean, it's very common with women to have low bile, even if you do have a gallbladder. Bile tends to get sludgy and thick, and things like birth control or stress or thyroid issues or eating processed foods. There's many things that can cause bile to become like too sticky and sludgy, and that's where you get like those gallstones, the bile stones. So most women do not have great bile flow to begin with, and this is one thing that I'm often working on with my clients, especially women over 40. 60 to 80% of women over 40 have bile that's so thick they can't properly digest their fat. So a lot of times we need to go in and support that bile flow so they're able to start having proper fat metabolism. So that's a really key piece. But other things that can happen there too is I see more gut infections because they don't have enough bile, they don't have enough stomach acid. And then again, going back to those microbes and pathogens are able to get through and they're able to colonize. So this is really common. I also see a lot of stool irregularities, especially for ladies who have had their gallbladder removed. This is a very common surgery. It's one of the most common and most profitable surgeries in the United States. And, I get it. Sometimes you're having a gallbladder attack and it's a last resort. You kind of have to have it done. However, if this is something you can prevent, it's something we absolutely want to prevent. You want to keep your gallbladder as much as possible, unless you're in an emergency situation where there's just no other option. Even if you have gallstones or you have sludgy bile in your gallbladder, that is something that we can work to reverse. So just so you know, it's always better to keep an organ whenever possible, because there are consequences to not having it. So I have so many clients come in and I'm always asking, do you have your gallbladder? Because so often they won't, and they won't really think anything of it. They're not really warned about the long-term consequences that this can cause, but they're having poor digestion, they're having nutrient deficiencies, they're having stool irregularities and diarrhea. Bad fat metabolism, they're having trouble with fat metabolism, they're gaining weight. And then nutrient deficiencies, like I mentioned. So if you can't absorb fat properly, you can be low in, so you think about vitamin D, that's a fat soluble nutrient, vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin K, things that are very important for our health. Those are fat soluble nutrients. If you have impaired fat metabolism, you're probably also low in your vitamin D, right? So something to just know and pay attention. So it's very important to have proper bile. And if you don't have a gallbladder, I always have my clients who do not have a gallbladder supplement with bile. You can get it in the form of ox bile, and you just take it with meals, and that will make a world of difference because you're actually putting that bile back in your body when you need it to help you properly metabolize those fats and make use of those fat soluble nutrients. So really important. But anyway, so going back to the stomach acid. So now that you know how stomach acid and bile play together, of course, if you don't have stomach acid, you're going to be more prone to infections. And so I've experienced this myself. If you've listened to my own, my first podcast episode sharing my story of dealing with, reoccurring infections, and I hear this from a lot of my clients. So if they come in and they're having vaginal infections like yeast or bacterial vaginosis, they're having gut microbial imbalances, they're getting bloated, there are other infections in other places in the body. It could be like thrush in the mouth. That's yeast in the mouth. I always go back and look at digestion, look at their stomach acid, because that is often the root cause of all these other problems that happen further downstream. So we're always looking for what is the most upstream cause and that's causing all these downstream problems. So the problems downstream, yes, they're problems, but that's not the root cause. The problem isn't, actually the infection. It was what led to the vulnerability to you getting that infection. Was it something that we can prevent? And if it's low stomach acid, we can absolutely fix and prevent that. So again, that's why if any of these issues apply to you, I always have people supplement with hydrochloric acid, which is stomach acid, and enzymes. You can get a supplement that has them both in one. There's a Enzymes dash HCl by Protocol for Life Balance is one that I use a lot. 1 or 2 capsules with meals kind of as needed, especially if the person is younger. You can often retrain the body, and within maybe 3 to 4 months, you might not even need this anymore because your body will be secreting its own stomach acid. Now, if the person is older, it might be something that they need to be on forever just because their body is outputting less in general. But this can be very helpful. The only thing that I would say, if you have a really high H. pylori, and you'd know from getting tested content in your stomach, you'd want to watch out. Or if you have an active ulcer, you'd obviously want to watch out because you could feel some burning and discomfort and irritation. But for 9 times out of 10 with digestive issues, supplementing with stomach acid or hydrochloric acid, which is HCl, and enzymes is so incredibly helpful and life-changing. It's like kickstarting your digestion. And then another fear that I get from a lot of people is, well, and women especially, is, well, I don't want to be hungrier though. I don't want my digestion to come back because it's good that I'm not, eating that much. And what if suddenly my digestion kicks back in and I'm eating all this stuff? And I always tell them, but you want to make proper use of what you're eating so your body feels satiated, right? It's when the body is adequately nourished and satiated that you're not going to feel hungry anymore. So taking this is not just going to make you eat more. It's going to make you better. It's going to make better use of what you are eating so you feel fuller faster, actually with nutrients. So it's actually a good thing. And then it's also going to take a load off your lower GI system, right? So if you have gut issues, or if you're feeling bloated, or if you have issues lower down the chain, fixing the stomach acid at the top, remember what I said about dominoes, you're fixing that first domino so that they can all fall appropriately, right? So that's what that the stomach acid does. So that is like such a key piece that I had to, kind of get on my soapbox and talk about, but it is so important. So if you don't have a good appetite, regularly, you're just not feeling hungry, or you're feeling really full after just a little bit of food, think about your stomach acid. It's probably what's going on. Okay. So what about if you have a really high appetite? What about what's the complete opposite? So we just talked about, if you have a low appetite or you feel really full really fast. What if you have a really high appetite? And I have a few different things that I would ask you there if this is you. So is weight an issue? Maybe it's not. Some people just have a higher appetite because maybe they're very active. They have a, very active metabolism and they eat a lot, but is weight a problem? If weight's not a problem, either, too much or too little, I think that that's fine. Go listen to your body cues, right? Are you actually hungry, or are you just craving food? That would be my next question, because oftentimes we will be eating all day long as a coping mechanism, not actually because we're hungry, right? So do you genuinely have an appetite, or are you stress eating? Or do you have cravings and you're eating because you have cravings? So really pay attention and differentiate. Do I legitimately feel hunger, or am I just craving something? Because that's something completely different. Then that's not appetite, right? That's maybe you're not absorbing the food that you are eating. So your body's giving you cues to keep eating and keep eating and keep eating to hopefully eventually consume the nutrients that it wants. So that's another important thing to know. Or maybe you need some gut support, right? So if you don't have enough stomach acid, you're not properly absorbing your food, then your body is going to force you to keep eating. Or if you, again, relates to gut infections and microbial overgrowth, those microbes that live in your gut, they can hijack the signals to your brain and make you think that you're hungry when you're not. And what do they love? They love sugar. So those sugar cravings, I'm always telling people, it's not you, it's them. And then people are like, well, who's them? And I'm like, yeah, it's the microbes that live in your gut. They're craving sugar because that's what they thrive off of. So they're sending you signals to your brain to make you think that you're craving the sugar. But most often you're not even craving the sugar. It's those bad microbes in your gut that are hijacking that and making you think that you're craving sugar, and you're feeding them. And that's how they thrive and stick around. So good gut flora, they like fiber. Bad gut flora, they like sugar. So all those sugar cravings, you are just feeding those bad guys in your gut. And if you're having bloating or digestive issues, yeast overgrowth, things like that, you're just making it worse by feeding them sugar. So important things to know. So with the high appetite, you know, is weight a problem? Are you really actually hungry? Or is it just, like sugar, cravings and things like that? And then, of course, there is the exception, of course, if someone has a really severe health issue, maybe someone has cancer, maybe someone has, a parasite infection or something, like a tapeworm where they are just eating all the time and they're not gaining the weight, right? So you might be hungrier because it might be, an underlying health issue that's going on too. It would be something you'd want to get checked with with a functional or naturopathic physician, ideally that is gut literate. And then finally, fluctuations in appetite. So this is another thing that can be, and I've certainly noticed it in my own journey. For example, I've shared in my story, I was sharing how, I had all these gut issues in the past and, I wasn't very hungry because I couldn't really digest food very well. And then when I fixed that, my appetite went up. Also, if you're working out, if you are exercising, if you are active, of course you're going to be more hungry. So a lot of times when ladies will come in and we'll get them exercising, we'll get them lifting weights, we'll get them, on that type of plan, your appetite's going to go up because you're expending more energy, you're expending more calories. Your body needs protein and nutrients to, build up that muscle and rebuild and replenish after exercise. So if you're just, if you've started doing more activity in your life and you find yourself being hungrier, eat accordingly. Eat accordingly because your body is giving you cues. It's telling you what it needs, right? Intermittent fasting is another thing I've noticed. Of course, if you are doing some intermittent fasting, when it's time to eat again, especially if it's a long fast, like, when I do a 36-hour fast and I eat the next day, I'll eat quite a good bit because I haven't eaten for a day and a half. So when it's time to eat, I will have a good appetite. And, it doesn't scare me that I do. I know that my body is replenishing and I take advantage and I fuel it with good things, with protein, which is nourishing and filling, and healthy fats and nutrient-dense foods. It's a wonderful time to take advantage and fill up on those good things instead of snacking and eating, processed foods or refined carbohydrates or things like that. So basically, on a final note, appetite is a good thing. Like I said, we want to have an appetite for life and for food. Eat when you're hungry is really the theme, but differentiate, am I really actually hungry or is this just a craving? But when it's genuine hunger, obviously we want to eat when we're hungry, but we want to eat nourishing, satisfying foods like protein and healthy fats. So if this has been helpful, be sure to like and share with other women, other people in your lives so that they can benefit from this knowledge as well. And thank you so much for tuning in.